All right, well, welcome to the Get Outside Earth Day event. I would like to acknowledge that Regina is on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Nehiyawak or Cree, the Anishinaapiak or Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm looking forward to all these presentations today. I think it provides a really awesome opportunity for all of us to kind of reflect on the land that we're living on and our connection to it. We've had some great presentations so far and some good ones coming up as well. The virtual event is taking place from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and we have a new presentation every 30 minutes. The sessions will also be available for viewing on the Nature Regina website either tomorrow or Monday. And we invite you to watch the webinar, download the activity, and head out in your own neighborhood and try out some of these self-guided Earth Day activities. We're very excited to bring this event to you online. We had to really rethink things with the current pandemic situation in the city. A big thanks, I work with Nature Regina, and a big thanks to Wild Outside, which is a program offered by the Canadian Wildlife Federation. Thanks also to the Nature Conservancy of Canada, Nature Saskatchewan, the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, and the Royal Saskatchewan Museum. We all worked really hard together to put this event together for today. We also want to thank the City of Regina for providing funding for this event to make it possible. And during the session, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And then once our next presenter is done, then we will try to get to as many questions as we can. So Jory Cadman works with Wild Outside, which is a program for 15 to 18-year-olds to get outside in Regina, and it's offered through the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And I will pass it over to you, Jory.
Awesome, thanks, Shannon. My head seems to be a bit cut off here. I don't know why that is, so sorry about that. Can everybody hear me okay so far? Yes. I'm also in, awesome, thanks, Anne. Yes, I'm also in great. Cathedral, so I'm just wondering if I'm cutting out too, but like we're okay.
I think so far you're good. You and Shannon Chernick have been totally fine, so.
Okay, great. And you can see my presentation?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I'll get started. Just let me know if anything kind of doesn't go as planned. Yeah. All right, so hi everyone, happy Earth Day. My name is Jory. I'll be doing a short presentation on Saskatchewan's grasslands. So I work for the Canadian Wildlife Federation with a program called Wild Outside. I'm just going to take a minute to introduce that program to you. So myself and Erin, we run this program together in Regina. It's for 15 to 18-year-olds who are interested in outdoor activities and service projects. And I've put the website here. If you would like more information, you can get more information and you can register on wildoutside.ca. Yeah, and as Erin and Shannon said, if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. This is a subject I'm still learning about. My schooling has been in human impact on the environment, specifically social and cultural factors. So I'm definitely still learning more of the technical kind of sciencey side of things. But yeah, absolutely happy to find the answers for you if I don't have them myself. So I would like to acknowledge that we are on traditional lands referred to as Treaty 4 territory, the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. As a settler on this land, I recognize the role I play in truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and wish to keep in mind whose land I'm on while facilitating today. I would also like to acknowledge that many Plains Indigenous groups and some of the Métis made their homelands and livelihoods in the grasslands before Western settlement. Great, so I'll be talking for a few minutes about grasslands and then I have an online quiz if you would like to try that. Okay, so as you may have guessed, grasslands are areas on Earth that are dominated by different types of grasses. Grasslands are one of the most productive and diverse ecosystems on Earth, and they're maintained by grazing temperatures, which I'll talk more about in a minute. In the grasslands areas, there's not enough rainfall to support the growth of a forest, but not so little that a desert forms. So geographically, they're usually found somewhere between forests and deserts. Grasslands are one of the world's biomes. A biome is a collection of plants and animals that have common characteristics for the environment they exist in. Grasslands can also be called savanna, steppe, prairies, or pampas in other parts of the world. So as you can see on the map here, grasslands can be found in a couple different places around the globe. We have some grasslands in southern Saskatchewan, as well as Alberta and Manitoba. And the area of grasslands in North America is sometimes referred to as the Great Plains. They stretch from Canada through the United States and into Mexico. So next I will talk a little bit about why grasslands are so important. First of all, they're a critical part of Saskatchewan's environment. So large areas of vegetation, such as forests, are what is known as a carbon sink. When these areas are left undisturbed, they're able to provide a storage place or a sink for carbon and other gases to be contained. As we know, plants breathe in CO2 and expel oxygen, and carbon is taken in and stored within the plant itself. Carbon is stored in the entire plant, including that which is underground. When grasslands grow, they develop a large expansive root system, which all stores carbon. This helps reduce the carbon in the atmosphere and acts as a buffer against climate change and extreme weather events. And recent studies have been suggesting that grasslands actually have the capacity to store more carbon than forests because they are less in danger of wildfires and drought. And grasses also have deep roots that stabilize slopes and protect soil from being eroded. Next, grasslands are home to a variety of plants, shrubs, and berries, all of which have been sources for food for humans and other species for many thousands of years. As humans, we are able to hunt many of the animals that call the grasslands home. The grasslands are also a great place to grow food, as long as we don't entirely convert all the grasslands to agriculture, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Grassland soils are fertile, and many species of grasses are a good source of food for livestock. Grasslands are a great habitat for the pollinators that fertilize our crops. Grassland-dependent insects like wasps and ground beetles act as natural pest control for crops because they feast on aphids and grasshoppers. In Saskatchewan's grasslands, you can find many small patches of water called wetlands. These help to filter our water. Wetlands absorb water that is contaminated by runoff from urban centers, agriculture, and other industrial activities. Wetland vegetation traps sediment and pollutants, and wetland microorganisms break down the contaminants. Nature's balance is upset when wetlands are drained, sending an excess of unfiltered water down. When there is heavy rain, wetland depressions provide an area to store excess water, and they also provide an important source of water during a drought. So in this way, they're a buffer against both floods and droughts. And wetlands also provide really important stopover and breeding grounds for migratory birds when they're on their migration path. Grasslands provide the necessary habitat for several wildlife species. We have grazing animals like antelope and elk, burrowing animals like the prairie dog and the Richardson's ground squirrel, and predators like snakes and coyotes. Many of these species cannot exist or would have trouble existing in any other type of habitat because they're well adapted to the conditions we have here. Grassland animals need to be able to feed off the types of grasses and other vegetation in the grasslands. They need to be able to hunt for other animals, and they need to be able to survive in our hot summer temperatures and cold winter temperatures. Plants as well must be able to survive these conditions. Our grasslands are quite dry, so plants need to be tolerant to drought or able to survive in dry conditions. Wildflowers such as yarrow, hyssop, and milkweed are found in grasslands as well. These are a critical habitat and food source for pollinated species. Milkweed, for example, is critical for monarch butterflies. And next, I will talk about one of the animals that calls the grasslands home. So this is a bison. Bison are a keystone species for the grasslands. And a keystone species is a very important species of animal. It means if you remove this animal from the ecosystem, then the whole ecosystem would be in danger of collapse. Keystone species have an important relationship to other plants and animals in the ecosystem. For example, wolves are a keystone species in some areas because they hunt deer and they keep the deer population under control. Without them, the deer population would dramatically increase, and this would create an imbalance in the ecosystem. So bison are important because they provide the ability for other animals to make their own habitats. There are a couple of ways they do this. First of all, the bison's dung acts as a fertilizer, incorporating new and more nutrients into the soil to help grass growth. This attracts bugs and insects that break down plants in the soil. Some of these insects would not be in the grasslands if it weren't for bison dung. As well, as a bison travels the plains, new insects and bacteria and some birds travel with them on their fur. This introduces them to new areas and increases species diversity. When a bison walks on the ground, their hoof prints also create holes in the soil to increase the amount of oxygen in the soil. This is called aeration. Oxygen is crucial for soil health and new plant growth. All right. So now that we know a little bit more about grasslands, I'll talk a little bit about the history. So before Europeans came to Canada, the grasslands had regular disturbances that helped keep the ecosystem in balance. These included fires, grazing, extreme temperatures, and droughts. When I say the word disturbance, it sounds like a bad thing, but all these disturbances helped to create and maintain the grassland ecosystems that are really important. The plants and the animals that evolved and exist in the grasslands had to be tolerant or able to live in these conditions. So for example, fire, which was either caused by lightning or deliberately by humans, is one of the reasons why the grassland landscape is dominated by grasses and not trees. Fire also adds valuable nutrients to the soil. With the arrival of European settlers, mostly starting in the mid to late 1800s, the landscape changed very quickly and dramatically. Europeans saw the prairies as an open land that was not being used to its full potential. Deep and fertile soils presented settlers with some of the best farmland in the world. So major agricultural conversion took place mostly between 1880 and 1930, turning many of the once wild prairie grasslands into fields or crops. Since European settlement, domestic cattle have replaced wild bison and cropland has replaced native prairie plants. Many plants and animal species were threatened by these new developments, and their habitats became fragmented or separated into small pieces. Early agricultural settlers were frustrated by pest species such as coyotes or prairie dogs, and they resorted to overhunting them or maybe poisoning them. As a result, predators who relied on those species lost a crucial food source and began disappearing as well. So agricultural conversion has not only continued but intensified over the last 100 years. The North American prairies produce the majority of grain products for the world, so this is a really important part of our economy. But few patches of native grasses were left uncultivated, and today they only exist in small areas. Grasslands are continually at threat to expanding farms. Wetlands are also being drained to make more space for crop production. Grasslands are now recognized as one of the most endangered biomes in the world. In Saskatchewan, approximately 20% or less of the province's native grasslands remain. Luckily, many efforts have been made to conserve and restore Saskatchewan's grasslands. Grassland restoration is a pretty tricky process. It involves many different sciences and steps to bring it all together. We cannot just plant grasses and expect the ecosystem to flourish again. Bacteria, insects, animals, and humans. So we need to bring all of those things back in order to fully restore the ecosystem. Conservation organizations like the Nature Conservancy of Canada are doing really important work. Many of their biologists and experts understand how to bring these ecosystems back to life. Projects are being done to both conserve existing grasslands and restoring areas that have been destroyed. There are also special projects happening to improve habitats that have been hurt by urban development and invasive species, as well as reintroducing particular animals and plants to certain areas. So bison reintroduction projects are happening at Grasslands National Park, Elk Island in Banff National Park, and at Wanuskewin outside of Saskatoon. Blue gamma grass and native fescue grasses are also being reintroduced in some areas as an important food source for bison and other species. As we continue to recognize the importance of fire to restore plants and soil nutrients, controlled burns are being done in some areas too. And many farmers and landowners are dedicating parts of their land to grassland restoration by planting wild grasses and wildflowers. This also helps to attract important pollinator species. So thankfully, there are a lot of things we can do to be part of wildlife conservation and restoration. Research and knowledge are critically important for understanding grassland ecosystems and how to help protect and restore them. We can check out what our local conservation organizations are doing, such as the Nature Conservancy, Prairie Conservation Action Plan, Birds Canada, Nature Regina, Nature Saskatchewan, and there are a lot more. We can visit protected areas, such as regional, provincial, or national parks, and learn about the plants and animal species there. And we can become involved in citizen science, doing a BioBlitz or a bird count, where people go out and try to identify plants and animal species, both in their cities and in rural areas. This helps scientists find out which species are doing well and which might be in trouble. Okay, yeah, so just before I wrap up here, I want to recognize a really amazing Saskatchewan photographer whose photos I used several times in this presentation. His name is Branimir Jetbai. He's a biologist and wildlife photographer based out of Saskatoon. And he did the photography for this book called Islands of Grass, which was really nice. So I thought that would be a good kind of resource to share. And I've also created a quiz on Kahoot. This is a quiz on bison. It's pretty short, it's only 20 questions. So you can test your knowledge. So all you need to do is visit the Kahoot website. You can just Google play Kahoot and it will come up. And then you can enter the game pin here. And then that activity is also in the resource package along with all the other presenters' activities. All right. So right before I wrap up here with a quote, we've come to see the grassland as a resilient, critically important ecosystem that supports hundreds of specially adapted plant, mammal, bird, and reptile species that can't be found anywhere else in the world. Fascinating predator-prey relationships, rare flowering plants, glacial formations that fascinate geologists. These are just a few of the elements that characterize Canada's grasslands, one of our most important and most threatened natural spaces. So a big thank you for everyone that attended these presentations today, and thank you to our other presenters. And a huge thanks to Shannon and Aaron and Kayla for putting this all together. And I think that's about it. So I'll stop my screen share here.
Thank you, Jory. That was awesome. I learned so much. I'm sure Shannon did as well, and our awesome attendees. That was absolutely